Hello and welcome back to Module 5. I have uploaded energy resources last night, specifically the video of nuclear energy last night, and somebody already commented, even though I have not linked it in BBL. So, someone, not a spam comment or like a bot comment, said, of course, nuclear energy is renewable, fast breeder reactors, and fusion energy could provide pretty much unlimited energy. So just in case you will run into this comment, I just want to clarify if Mr. Cocolore's comment was actually correct. But before I do that, I just want to clarify that I encourage questions like this. If you have comments or rebuttals against whatever we are discussing, that is definitely welcome because we want an academic discussion between us, the teacher, and the student. So, Mr. Cocolore is saying that nuclear energy is renewable because there is a presence of fast breeder reactors and also the fusion energy. But what I think he is getting confused with is the idea of renewable versus sustainable, because nuclear energy is very sustainable. When we are talking about nuclear energy, you're just working with small amount of materials and you could produce a lot of energy that cannot be provided with the same amount by the other fossil fuels, and even the other renewable energy sources. So what happens in a fast breeder reactor? So for example, you have a starting material, uranium, which is radioactive. You split that through fission, and it will create different radioactive materials in the process. And one radioactive material or byproduct is plutonium, and plutonium is also fissionable. So this depends on what type of reactor you actually have. So if you can control your uranium to split into plutonium, so you get energy from uranium, and then you could use the plutonium byproduct to split it again and provide you with more energy. So it's quite sustainable because you are actually producing a means of more energy than the other forms of nuclear reactors before. So this is new technology and has not been widely used yet around the world. But this idea of using fast breeder nuclear reactors makes nuclear energy even more sustainable. But that does not make it renewable, because when we say renewable, there is an unlimited supply. Uranium is still fixed, or there's still a limit of natural uranium in our environment. So it's still not considered renewable, but a sustainable. So thank you to this random commenter for the suggestion or comment about our video. But so far, so much for nuclear energy. In this video, we will be focusing on alternative or renewable energy sources. So these are energy sources which are not based on the burning of fossil fuels or the splitting of atom. So in the past lectures, we have used heat energy, either in fossil fuels or nuclear energy, in order to start our conversion to electrical energy. But this time, we will skip fossil heat energy. So instead of starting with heat energy, we'll start with kinetic energy right away, use that to power mechanical energy, and then convert that into electrical energy. So only 3 steps for all the renewable energy sources. Okay, so I want to clarify that when we're talking about renewable or alternative energy, they're not the perfect solution to the climate change problem, because if you observe or look closely at each alternative energy source, they do have good in them. Like they are good for the environment at some extent, but they will have certain limitations and also some costs to the environment as well. So that's what we're going to go through, the advantages and disadvantages of renewable or alternative energy resources. Okay, so first renewable source that we will be discussing is geothermal energy. So this is the energy utilizes heat energy from the Earth's crust. So utilizing the natural heat from our geosphere in order to create electrical energy. So it's considered clean in comparison to our fossil fuels, and since we have a continuous supply of heat from beneath the earth or within the earth, then it's going to be sustainable if it will be implemented widespread. Okay, so geothermal energy resources could be in the form of heat from shallow ground, hot water and or hot rock from a few miles beneath the earth's surface, or it could be dug even deeper to molten rock called magma. So all of these sources of heat can be utilized to produce electricity. So 1% of heat in the uppermost crust, or 5 kilometers from the surface downwards, provides 250 times more energy than the stored in crude oil and natural gas combined. So since our planet is so big, and well, it's the biggest sphere there in, as you can recall in our four subsystem lecture, it can provide a lot of heat energy. So we can use the heat energy naturally being produced by the earth in powering our society. And in the Philippines, it's used by 19 million people in the Philippines. Okay, so heat raises the temperature of rocks, which in turn increase the temperature of nearby groundwater. Some groundwater turns into underground steam, which is then tapped into turbines to create electricity. So what this slide is saying is that there are natural underground steam in the form of geysers. So if you have hot rock underneath and it's mixed with groundwater, that could naturally produce steam. And in the natural environment, we could already tap that and use that to power our turbines. Okay, so in the geothermal energy, it's mostly used in the Visayas region. It supports 38% of the electrical demand of that region. So it's less of an environmental hazard, as we mentioned, compared to fossil fuels, but still emits carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and sulfur dioxide. So again, it's considered clean because we are not actively producing like greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. But during the process, whenever you are digging up or creating a geothermal plant, you're going to open up the earth, and in the process, you could release gases. So natural gases that are from within the earth, and that's in the form of these gases listed here. Okay, so some sources of geothermal energy, so reservoirs, geysers, so it's like the Old Faithful. If you know the concept of the Old Faithful, it's the location wherein there's always a steam blast from underneath the earth. So boiling mud pots, volcanoes, and of course hot springs. So uses of geothermal energy aside from producing electricity: hot spring spas, water heating at fish farms, provide buildings with natural heating, raising plants in greenhouses, and drying crops. Okay, so how does a geothermal power plant work? As mentioned before, we're going to use water. So this is the earth and naturally producing heat. There are different types of geothermal power plants. So if there is already water present in the area, you could just use the ground water and then use that in the natural conversion of the steam. But if there's no natural groundwater, you could actually transport water there and put it from your heat source, thus producing steam. Okay, so you have your hot water, which will be turned into steam, and the steam will move our turbines, and that is connected to the electrical generator, and then that's what we transport to our power grid. Then the water that we have used to spin or move our turbine will be injected back into the earth, just so that we have a circular process in producing our energy. So quite ideal if we need a continuous supply of electricity. Okay, so pros, of course, available all year round. There is no pause when it comes to the heat of our Earth. So it's always available. You don't need combustion or fuels to start the process of producing electricity because heat is always there naturally. It is not affected by weather, right? It's a clean resource relative to fossil fuels. It's economically sound because even if you start with a big upfront money because you have to pay for the building of um, the building of your power plant, then later on the electricity costs will be cheaper. The production of electricity will be cheaper. Okay, so again, renewable sources are not perfect. Okay, so the idea of geothermal energy is that you could only use that in specific areas because our planet distribution of heat on our planet is not always equal. Like there are only certain locations where heat is readily accessible. So for example, maybe Los Baños, we have ready geothermal energy, but in locations like Manila, they don't have that. So they can't have geothermal energy to support Manila. So there will only be certain places where they have heat energy and then create a power plant or build a power plant. High installation costs because again you have to have high upfront money. You have to build power plants, geothermal power plants, and connect it to the grid. So that's new infrastructures in order to support your new system of energy. Can run out of steam. So if your power plant is running with natural groundwater, there is a possibility that your groundwater will eventually run out. So there's your problem. That's why there are power plants which are now subjecting water artificially into the ground so that they will have continuously amount of steam, but that's additional cost. So the cost, if your production of electricity is expensive, that means for us consumers it will be expensive as well. So there's the trouble of that. Next, may release harmful gases. So as I've mentioned, whenever you are opening up the earth to access the heat energy, there's a possibility of releasing harmful gases into the atmosphere. Possible high transportation costs. Okay, so the possible high transportation costs comes in the idea that not every location can build a geothermal power plant. So let's say that we build geothermal power plants, but there are some locations which needs that energy. So that means we need to build infrastructure so that we can transport the electricity we produce here to other locations like Manila. And that's gonna take a lot of money because you need infrastructures in order to do that. So you're either going to build more power lines or you have another way to convert your geothermal energy into batteries, then that's gonna be expensive. So geothermal energy is sustainable if you are supporting a certain community or a localized community. But if you're going to support, like use one plant in order to support a lot of cities, then that's gonna be an expensive enterprise, right? And may not be plausible. And another things, it is susceptible to earthquakes. Since we are digging up into the earth and then exposing the heat, then if ever that there are earthquakes, your power plants may get damaged. And yeah, so that's the cost, or there will be a loss of electrical energy in the community it's supporting. Okay, so these are the pros and the cons of geothermal energy. So I have been mentioning that Los Baños is a good source of heat energy, but there is actually another location in Calauan. So we have a power plant, geothermal power plant at Calauan. So I think some students already seen this power plant. So if ever you pass by Calauan, Laguna, you might see this power plant. Students have told me it's quite a noisy place because you will hear the steam. This is steam. So steam coming out from deep into the earth is being released here into the atmosphere just to cool down. Just to cool down the water that is being that is being run deep into the earth. Okay, so second renewable source that we will be talking into this video is hydroelectric energy. So this utilizes moving water to turn into turbines, and it supports 38% of the electricity demand of Mindanao. So a good example of this is the Benguet Dam. So it is built and used to produce hydroelectric energy. So dams are installed in strategic locations. So highlight on strategic locations where there is a substantial drop in elevation. So the idea is you have in order to have a, if it's not natural, right? So if you want a hydroelectric power plant, you need a dam, because according to this slide, you need a some substantial drop in elevation. So basically, we're using gravity to spin our turbine. So we use water dropping because of gravity, and the drop of water will power our turn of the turbine. So it's like a, what do you call it, the water wheels that you see in books and movies, but in this case we're just gonna do it in large and more powerful scale in order to produce a lot of electricity. So you have a reservoir which takes in water, which has a lot of water. You release that, and the flow of water will power our turbine. So the turbine is connected to the generator, which is then released to the electricity, then is connected to the power grid, going to the consumers and homes of people. Okay, so it's quite straightforward. I think one example of a good can't speak, hydroelectric power plant is Maria Cristina Falls. So Maria Cristina Falls is unique because it's huge, and since it's so huge, it can support the production of electricity. Not every falls or waterfall can do that. There are only specific waterfalls that can support hydroelectricity. So Maria Cristina is a natural sort of power plant, because all we needed to do was put a turbine and some generators, and it's already producing electricity. For the other locations, you have to build a dam in order to produce hydroelectrical energy. Okay, so pros, it's available all year round because water, as long as you have a source of fresh water or seawater, depending on your source. There are also, instead of using falls or dams, there are also seaside power generators or electricity generators. Okay, so it's available all year round. No combustion of fuel involved, as mentioned earlier. It's not also dependent of weather. It's a clean resource. It's economically sound, okay, because once you build the infrastructure needed, then you don't have much additional costs. It contributes to the development of remote communities. So if you build a dam in that location, then it would give jobs to the community, and you could also advertise your dams as a form of recreational activity. Since you now have a controlled environment of water, you could build maybe boating sessions, kayaking, picnic by the dam or lake, something like that. So it's gonna be good for the remote community, because it will like improve their way of life and open up businesses. Cons, however, is always present. So environmental damage, because you're going to build a dam, meaning you're going to change the natural setting or natural environment wherever you're going to build your power plant. So there's gonna be environmental damage, high upfront capital costs because it's not cheap to build a dam. Not widespread, because there are only certain locations with high amounts of water. So strategic locations with enough water wherein it can support a continuous supply of electricity production. may lead to droughts, because whenever you're building a dam, you're going to concentrate water in one location. So where does it come from? Of course, it's gonna come from the surroundings. So it might lead to droughts in other locations of the dam. Carbon dioxide and methane emission. So even if hydroelectric energy itself, the process does not produce carbon dioxide and methane, eventually it might produce some in the form of decaying plants and animals. So since you are changing a lot of the environment, it will lead to the death of some organisms and the possibility of digging up um, formerly buried organisms, because you're changing the flow of the water. So if the former algae and fishes and plants got dug up, and that process will produce carbon dioxide and methane. Though not depending on the size of the dam and the location, the amount of those gases may vary. Okay, so susceptibility to earthquakes. Again, you cannot build a dam just anywhere or near fault lines. So these are strategic locations which are safe from earthquakes and has enough supply of water that it will not create much damage against the environment. Okay, so there you go, your pros and cons of hydroelectric energy. So even if we would like to build geothermal power plants or hydroelectric power plants everywhere, there are several factors that we have to consider. Okay, so that's it for now in this video. Then we'll continue on the next one. Stay safe. Bye.